Absurd settings can be a strenuous balancing act. What the rules are isn't important, so long as they're consistently applied throughout the events. If not carefully considered and controlled, an absurd setting can barge in and become the focus of the narrative. This will leave the reader disconnected from the events, and their lasting impressions will be of a strange atmosphere, or some other ridiculous surface detail. While Zeno Clash is utterly preposterous across most of the game's parts, the eccentricity is masterfully applied. Not only is this world bizarre, but the gameplay is similarly odd. The characters act in reasonable ways within the context of the world, even if their designs are fantastical. Ace Team's debut release not only offers an original narrative setting, but also a gameplay style that is one of the most unique I have ever played. Zeno Clash is a first-person fighting game. The game mostly revolves around melee combat with humanoid opponents, with occasional shifts into shooting and exploration. Gat, the player character, is an amateur boxer who was taught to box by a corwid in the woods. As a result, the fights are frantic and chaotic, and the techniques look as desperate as they sound. After killing the leader of his gang, his own father-mother no less, Gat attempts to flee from his vengeful siblings. Deirdre joins Gat in exile as the pair travel to the end of the world. Along the way, they will face adversity from the wild corwids, be tracked by a skilled hunter, take on swarms of wrathbirds, and dive back into Gat's memories to uncover the catalyst behind Gat's violent actions. In the end, Gat will have to face his family and rectify his actions. But first, what the buttons do. The first-person controls are satisfactory and somewhat standard, but some things have been altered for the combat system. Gat can be in one of two modes that slightly alter the controls when active. The player can stand neutrally, or they can lock onto an enemy to change their moveset. When not locked on, left mouse will cause Gat to kick forward, and movement is standard. Gat can also only use weapons when not locked on, including melee weapons. He puts them away when the player activates the lock-on. When locked on, the view and movements will orbit the target character. Gat's combat options also drastically increase. With a target, Gat can block, dodge, combine punches, grab opponents, and pull his arm so far backwards that he needs a run-up in order to connect the attack. The enemies can be stunned or sucker punched, and in an all-out brawl, it's likely that a blow meant for one target makes its way to another. It isn't pretty, but what else should a fist fight between wild men look like? The combat sections are surprisingly varied despite the repeated enemies. There are 3 main factions of enemies, as well as a few solo foes to contend with. Father-Mother's gang, the Northern Gang, and the Corwids are groups of humanoids with members that fight in different styles. The gangs are more conventional in their styles, although they are as amateur as Gat, and are likely to resort to using weapons where they can. The Corwids are crazed individuals that live in the forest and have a tendency to attack wildly and unpredictably. There are a few larger enemies that cannot be locked onto, and are only vulnerable to weapon damage. There are also bestial enemies, statue creatures, and a clan that hide in an inhospitable wasteland that are best battled with ranged weapons. The Hunter mini-boss is also mostly a ranged encounter. Ace Team chose to focus their gameplay design onto a handful of mechanics, which I think is the best strategy to employ when developing your first game. Keeping bloat and creep down helps refine the overall experience and keeps development time low. That, or they knew that the visuals would absorb a lot of time. Zeno Clash's art style is grounded in its absurdity. Everything obeys the laws of physics, but it's clear that this place isn't Earth. There may be humans among the characters, but they aren't the only members of this strange society. The pig-faced man is a favorite of mine because of the faces he makes in combat. They're just so characterful and give the game a distinct visual identity all on their own. The variety of Corwid appearances are also exceptional. They're still humanoids, but perfectly capture the activity they must partake in. There were some graphical issues with a couple of the characters, right at the end of the game, which makes the credit sequence seem like it hasn't worked properly. But other problems never really appeared. All of the textures are the same resolution, and are filled with so many little details to find that add to the character of the whole game. I also enjoy the presence of something ridiculous, and how the game never draws attention to it. Here's this massive dead fish. Anyways, the environments also appear quite drab, but the strange shapes and other details keep this game far above boring. And there are occasional palette shifts that help add a lot of color to something that could have been quite brown. Fortunately, Gat's adventure is a spectacular blast. The game opens in a dream. A red-tinted bamboo forest clearing filled with chickens and a masked man with a growly voice. The man notes that Gat used a bomb trick, but didn't do it correctly since Gat is still alive. This section is a combat tutorial where Metamok teaches the player to fight. Gat awakens and is next seen running for the gate to escape town. Deidre follows him to the gate and wonders why Gat would kill Father-Mother. Before much else can happen, a trio of gangsters appear and corner Gat and Deidre. Deidre climbs the gate to reach the controls while Gat holds his siblings back. The two manage to complete their tasks at roughly the same time, but are held up again on the outskirts. With the gangsters rebuffed, Gat and Deidre escape into the forest. What happened between Gat and Father-Mother to inspire Gat to attack them? Gat is unwilling to tell Deidre, and instead the pair focus on getting as far away from the town as they can. The forests are filled with critters and corvids, and Gat recounts a time he had been captured by a corvid that intended to eat him. The corvids are people who are totally powered by compulsion. Oxameter must walk in a straight line. Helim must be invisible. I think this is an interesting concept to be explored as a sub-theme. The people in town believe that being entirely compulsive is dangerous to those around you, so anyone who has adopted the corvid ways isn't safe to be around. Gat and Deidre also travel through a desert where a hunter has caught up to them. The hunter intends to collect the bounty on Gat, but is bound by honor to allow Gat a fair fight. What this means is that the hunter will stand on a platform on the head of a large herbivore while throwing animals with explosives tied to them at Gat. The hunter is blind, but uses the sounds of the rodents to determine where Gat is. I guess this is to explain why the hunter couldn't just shoot Gat easily, so it's an amusing solution. With the hunter defeated, Deidre asks for more details about Gat's exile. Gat's time with the corvids had made Father-Mother uncomfortable around Gat. Father-Mother always carries offspring with them, so if Gat had inherited some of the corvids' violent compulsions, the children could be in danger. After making it across the desert, Gat and Deidre arrive at a mysterious swamp. A group of statues seem to be holding a magic wand aloft, and when Gat takes it, they awaken and attack. The wand is the ideal weapon to defeat these statue people, but it requires charges. Any fire source can charge the wand, so the player has to make sure they light any flammable objects they find as they progress through the swamp. Meanwhile, there are more statue creatures emerging from the ground that the player must destroy. At the far end of the swamp is a large stone door. It opens and allows Gat to enter, but closes before Deidre can make it inside. Within are a number of torches that must be lit and kept lit in order to open the next door. More statues are spawning here, attempting to extinguish the torches. This repeats again, except the second room awakens a slumbering humanoid. He may appear menacing, but Golem wishes to help appease Gat's siblings. Golem has an omnipotent consciousness, so he is fully aware of all things. He had waited at the end of the world for Gat to come for him, which he explains as he rows a boat down a river through the wasteland. Since Golem already knows everything, he convinces Gat to tell Deidre the rest of the story. Gat had learned something about Father-Mother. Something that was so terrible that if he told anybody, the fallout would be devastating. Gat had been attempting to confront Father-Mother about the secret in a polite way, but Father-Mother's fear prevented Gat from being able to talk with them. Eventually, Father-Mother was cornered and chose to attack. This leads Gat to implement the trick with the bomb, in hopes that the secret were to die with the deaths of him and Father Mother. It didn't work, and as Gat, Deirdre and Golem arrived in town, they learned that Father Mother had also survived the encounter. But instead of allowing Golem to mediate, Father Mother chooses to attack Gat again. They fight, and although Gat wins, he still chooses not to tell Father Mother's secret. Instead, Golem does, because change is far more important than keeping the status quo. All aspects of Zeno Clash's craziness are employed throughout the story, and it takes a lot of courage and impeccable vision to attempt something as outlandish as this, let alone succeed in this way. Details exist to be noticed, and often narratives will draw attention to small things in order for them to pay off later. Ace Team put so many things into Zeno Clash that are ultimately just quirks of the world that finding obvious narrative objects is nearly impossible. This world is filled with oddities, and the characters just accept them, because the world they know is already strange. Maybe this woman's child really did turn into a pig. Maybe asexual reproduction is just a thing everyone can do. That's the brilliance. Nobody has to stop and explain every detail, or draw attention to every nuance. Yeah, the world spins. Don't you have something more important to think about? It's genius. Ace Team have been continuing to create extraordinary games since Zeno Clash's release, and while there have been some missteps during that time, the signature Ace Team eccentricity is heavily laden onto each release. Zeno Clash, while a superb experience in its own right, laid the groundwork for a decade of genre defiance from this small Santiago studio. I'm looking forward to the Eternal Cylinder, and I wish them all the best of luck. Zeno Clash may have been dreamy weirdness, so let's get a little more nightmarish.
He works alone, his hands defiling the bodies of the dead in his thirst for knowledge and power. His name is Adam Crowley, a man who was once respected in the field of science, until fate led him along another path towards black magic. Now he is in possession of the mythical Lost Diary of Samuel Pepys, a volume that contains the detestable rituals of the demon-worshipping Brotherhood of Hecate. Soon, he will complete his work. Tonight, as the sun sets on London one last time, he will unleash his demonic brood onto the streets. And should no one stop him, this city will be consumed by a horde of nightmare creatures.